Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the 20 Percenters, where we focus on what matters: health, wealth, relationships, and time. I've got the immense pleasure to sit down with Vered Kogan, executive coach and NLP practitioner. We have crossed paths in a really interesting way. I would describe our relationship as an attraction of frequencies. I was in a mastermind. I was asked to visit a mastermind called Vistage, where you were presenting, and in typical Marine fashion, I was super early, and you were setting up, and it allowed us an opportunity to introduce each other and get to know each other a little bit, and we just really, really, really connected in a very small amount of time. And as you would go on to present, you talked about the stages of consciousness and how we are, or competence. There it goes. There we go. Stages of competence, and the evolution and the strategic regression to continue to facilitate progress. And as I've been working through my NLP journey, it just kind of locks some things in for me in terms of how we become prepared to navigate whatever that next level is. And I really appreciate everything that you bring to the table, and I'm super pumped to share this space with you today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel the same.
Let's take a step back, and I'm super curious. What is it? How did you end up in this space?
Like many people, I've had a pretty varied career background.
Mm-hmm.
I started out as an engineer, actually, following in my dad's footsteps, and
Okay.
a few uncles and other people in the family, and then very quickly realized that's not for me. It
Okay.
didn't quite fill my heart. Went back to school, worked in management consulting and change management,
Okay.
and got laid off.
Oh wow.
I was part of a large downsizing. 20-some people from my area were let go, and I was fortunate enough to have been paired with a career coach for 6 months. That was part of my package, my severance package. And that individual, Michael is his name, he completely changed my life. There were moments like many people in transition that were very low. It kind of goes like a roller coaster.
Right.
And he helped me to reconnect with my own value and what I love. And I did that. I ended up pursuing marketing, and then had an opportunity to go back to school. And I thought, what should I study? And I thought, this opportunity and coaching was so valuable to me. I didn't even know how and where it would lead to, but intuitively I felt it was right. So went back, got an HR management degree, and ultimately started to coach. And it's been a journey ever since. It just keeps growing and growing.
Where does your education in neurolinguistic programming fit into that evolution?
So about 5 years ago, I attended a Tony Robbins event, Unleash the Power Within. And I thought, what is this guy doing? I mean, I don't know if you've been to one of these events. Yeah. So 10,000 people at the LA Convention Center going through these massive transformational shifts, and sometimes instantly.
Right.
And I thought, what is he doing? So when I realized a lot of that was NLP, I very quickly started that journey, became a practitioner, master practitioner, trainer. I hold trainings, and I'm on the master trainer track.
Okay. What is it? How does NLP enhance your ability to coach?
It has enhanced it in many ways. First of all, I would say personally, I have overcome a lot of my own stuff. That's number one. And as a coach, that when we do our own work, then we truly believe in the process, and we are able to utilize that with people even more effectively, because we truly believe that it works, and that gets, of course, projected, and that helps other people to get those results as well. But the techniques can be used for change in any area of life. And as a coach, it's all about change. So somebody comes to you as their coach because they want to do something with their body, do something with their relationships, with their business, and so on, their wealth, and so on. So I have found that NLP, along with timeline therapy, rapid transformational therapy, and several other techniques that I used, have allowed people to make changes in a very quick way. So coaching, I've been a coach since 2011 and have helped people to get all kinds of results.
Yeah.
But when you use certain techniques that use the way that the brain works and the way that the heart works, because I'm also a trainer with the Heart Math Institute, then you're able to create those shifts in a very quick way, because you go straight to the core of the issue. You remove the root cause, if you will, or reframe the root cause of the problem. So if you think of a garden, rather than just dealing with what's on the surface, you know, you go right underneath and remove the root of the problem so that it doesn't come back again. And I think that's where the permanent transformational shifts happen, and that's what excites me the most. That's why I keep learning, because I'm hungry for it. For that quick, permanent, major change.
Explain to me how timeline therapy works.
Of course. So timeline therapy is a series of techniques that helps people to let go of major negative emotions from their past, limiting beliefs. We all have them. It's universal. And of course, also to put goals into what we call their future timeline. So every individual holds their time, if you will, in a particular kind of way. And we store memories. One of the prime directives of the unconscious mind is that it stores memories in an organized way, what we call a gestalt. So there was a first time, for example, that somebody felt anger. Okay, they might have not been conscious or had the language to even call it anger, because sometimes it's in the womb, sometimes it's during birth, sometimes it's very early years, sometimes it's symbolically, potentially even in past lives. Some clients will go into past lives. So whether it's real or not, who knows, but symbolically the unconscious mind brings that up in order to let that go. So there's a root cause, a first time that we have experienced that emotion or have made that decision in our life, come to some conclusion about something in our life. And from there on, we have, anytime we have felt that emotion, let's say like anger, when we were 2, when we were 10, when we were 20, 30, 40, up till today, all of those emotions are connected in what's called the gestalt. All of those experiences, I should say, that have that same emotion, because it's the same chemical signature. Neurologically, it's the same. And so when you remove the root cause of the problem, meaning that the unconscious mind gets the positive meaning for the event, because everything does happen for us, for our evolution. But at some point, we assigned a negative meaning to it. So when we're able to get positive learnings and access the resources and take them to today, we are able to let go of that emotion all the way to this moment. So for instance, one of my clients yesterday, where we did timeline therapy together, we started with anger. We actually always start with anger. And she was able to consciously remember things that she was angry about. So before we did it.
Do you start with anger first because it's the most powerful of, like, let me back that. Let me ask a more clarifying question. Is there a specific order that you remove these 5 negative emotions?
Correct. There is. It's always anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. Is
why that order?
So imagine someone lets go of, let's say if they let go of fear, but they still have anger. Think about that reality. Someone does not have fear, has let go of fear, and they go out and they're angry at someone. They could do harm to someone or to themselves. So we always make sure to let go of anger, sadness, then fear, then hurt, and guilt. Of course, there's more to that, but in a quick answer, that's...
Got it. Got it.
So she could consciously remember, my client yesterday could consciously remember some things that she felt angry about, and she felt it in her tummy. And at the end of the process, which took no more than about 10, 15 minutes, she could no longer feel anger about anything in her past. She could remember the instances. The memories are crystal clear. But she does not, she feels completely neutral. There's no kinesthetic. And that energy has been released from her body. And that energy is not good for us. And that's why the unconscious mind wants to let it go. Because, for example, anger leads to higher cortisol, higher cholesterol. It leads to all kinds of heart disease issues and so on. So we know that negative emotions impact our health. And that is why it's really important that people take the time to release those from the past. Now, Does that mean that we won't feel negative emotions in the future? Of course not. We're not robots. Of course we're going to feel them. We just will only feel it when it's appropriate and warranted to feel it, because it can protect us.
Sure. Yeah. Which brings me to my next point. In the process of timeline therapy, as I've experienced it, there are a handful of instances where I was asked to acknowledge a negative emotion, what I perceive to be a negative experience, and the lesson learned from it that served me then, that inhibits me now, that it no longer serves me. Explain that part of the process in terms of, you get to a certain point in your life with these habits that are a result of the experiences that we've had, and at some point they helped you. But as we continue to evolve, some of those habits actually begin to inhibit progress and evolution. How do you differentiate between what served you and way back when and what no longer serves you now?
Well, you would know it no longer serves you now if it's limiting you in some way. If there's a change that you want to make, but you are either slow to making it, or you're kind of stuck in this kind of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of dance. Or if you're just completely stalled and not taking any action, then you know that there's something at an unconscious level, some program that is not serving you anymore.
Okay. What are some of the devices that go into acknowledging that thing?
So by acknowledging, you mean becoming conscious of it? Okay.
Because I feel like there's 2 stages, and this is my very novice experience with NLP, in terms of formal education speaking. There's the acknowledgement, and then there's action. Like, it's there. Now you have to do something. You have to make a choice to either keep it or replace it.
Correct. So the way that it is that, of course, to create any change, we've got to have awareness. We've got to have awareness of where we're going, what the intention is, what's the specific change that we want to create and why.
Right.
And we need to know what it is that we're thinking and feeling about that change. So if there is some thought process that we become aware of that we wish to change, and we can talk in a little bit of how to get that awareness. Okay. But let's say we have awareness. Let's say I want to create something, but I believe that I'm not good enough to do that or experienced enough, let's say. Okay. Then at that point, in order to shift that pattern, there are a few things that I need to do. Most people would just kind of become aware of it, and then they would just, maybe do some affirmations, they'll say, some positive things, and then they go on with their life, and then kind of just put it aside. Okay. That is not enough. Okay. We know that is not enough. So what we need to do is that we need to involve emotion. Because otherwise it's just a head thing. It's a conscious change that we're making, but all change is unconscious. It happens at the heart level. Right. All learning, all change, all behavior is unconscious. So in order to create that change at the unconscious level, what we need to do actually is first accept that. We need to accept that pattern and understand how it has served us. We need to understand the role, the purpose, the function, the intention of that part. So, for example, one of my clients yesterday, we were looking at, or if it was actually a couple of days ago, we were doing this, and it was a woman. I'm trying to think the specific scenario that we were working with, and it was in regards to her business, and kind of taking her business to the next level. And there were some beliefs that were holding her back. Okay. And we understood that when we did some work on the role and the function of those beliefs, is that they were there to protect her. Okay. In a way, they were essentially keeping her small, but to protect her, because at some point she told herself that she cannot have the confidence to make those kinds of decisions by herself, and that she needed others to make them for her, and so on. So before we create a change in some habitual thought patterns, we need to become aware of it. We need to accept it, understand its purpose, and then either let it go or give it a new function,
Okay.
essentially. And there are many ways to do that.
Sure. I remember when I started working with my current coach, Alex, and Legacy of Results. Our very first session was a mental and emotional release therapy session, and we worked through the timeline. We did the negative emotion thing, and what we uncovered in terms of what I perceived to be stagnation and lack of progress was because I felt guilt about not being able to take everybody who's on this journey with me all the way. And what I gained from that experience was the appreciation of real appreciation for the fact that people are in your life to have whatever impact they have for a specific amount of time, and to just be express gratitude for the time that you do have with them, as opposed to feeling guilty for when they're gone.
Correct.
And it was just very enlightening experience. And when you're working through those 5 negative emotions, like for me, it was an 8-hour process. It took all day. And
Wow.
like the third time I started counting, and I like blubbering, crying 7 times over the course of 8 hours, just purging all these things that are operating underneath the surface that are really in control of, you know, how far I'm able to take business, my relationships, whatever. And it's like, oh my God, so much of that stuff is holding me back.
That's right.
And like you're not even aware of it,
Yeah.
you know.
And that energy release is absolutely important.
Mhm.
And because we have certain emotional addictions, and when we're addicted to a certain emotion, let's say like guilt,
Mm-hmm.
what we do is that our unconscious mind will manifest all kinds of situations for us to feel guilty, for example.
Right.
And so we have certain patterns, emotional patterns of thought, patterns of behavior. And what you did in doing that work is that you understood what was underneath the pattern. What's the energy, the low frequency energy underneath that?
Mm-hmm.
And when you understand that, and when you're able to accept that energy, first of all, give it thanks for protecting you, essentially,
Right.
for as long as it did. But then to say, I don't need you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an adult. I am
Yeah.
safe. I am choosing to do this. I want to do this.
Sure.
And only then can you activate a higher frequency energy, like courage, like love, like
Okay.
all of those things, confidence to be able to do what it is that we
Right.
want to do to create.
I'll tell you what's interesting, and I'll share because I think it'll add context to a potentially ambiguous topic. As we were going through the process and eliminating these negative emotions, my dad planted a seed when I was 16 years old. He said, "You're going to be a millionaire before you're 30." And I was like, "Sounds good." But, I don't think people realize it, and it's hard from moment to moment to be aware of what's going to stick with you, right? Especially at that subconscious level. So he says, "You're going to be a millionaire before you're 30." And then he dies when I'm 23. And one of the things that was hindering me in the here and now was this guilt about not being able to take people with me on this journey, right? And what manifested was I didn't keep my promise to my dad. And even if I did, he wouldn't have been around to see it. And this is how those two things manifested. And those two things in my conscious mind are completely unrelated, but they have everything to do with each
That's
other, right? And I'm just such a huge proponent of doing deep work and such an advocate for coaching, because there's absolutely no way with the tools that I had in that moment that I would have ever connected those dots and established a correlation between those two things.
Yeah, and most clients, they struggle to do that at a conscious level because we can only be conscious of so little at a time, right? There's so many events in our life that are below our conscious awareness. Of course, as you know, the unconscious mind stores it all. It's like a recording device.
Right.
So when I do work with clients, whether it's timeline therapy, in which case they're as you know, it's a process of active imagination. It's a structural process. So it's not like typical therapy where you go in and you share, my mom said this and my dad said this and my teacher did that. It's, it allows our brainwave frequency to slow down. We get more coherent. We're essentially in our heart some more, and we're able to access a lot of that intelligence in terms of our own experience, but also intelligence from the electromagnetic field around our body. So, for example, in rapid transformational therapy, clients are in a state of hypnosis. So it just means a more relaxed state. And they always go back to, for whatever problem, 3 scenes. And the scenes come like that. Yeah.
This is a very relative question, but the greatest impact that you've experienced, either in your own personal journey or in the coaching of others?
For me personally, I think it was the first year when I studied the NLP practitioner course and the timeline therapy certification and letting go of fear. That was huge for me because, my business transformed, my life transformed. I didn't even realize that fear was holding me back.
Yeah.
But I noticed it very quickly in decisions that I made and not feeling fear in my body when it came to doing things. And that was, my head was telling me I should be afraid, I should be nervous, I should be worried.
Okay.
But there was just no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, and I believe this to be true, that fear and excitement in terms of the kinesthetic response to those two emotions actually feels the same? And when you have, that pit in your stomach, I always relate it to a roller coaster. You put 2 people on a roller coaster and they get to that apex right before you hit the free fall, and one person is excited and having the time of their lives and the other person is ready to, poop their pants. But they feel the same. Yeah. Like from an objective standpoint, that pit in the stomach, both of them have that. One chooses a positive response, the other one chooses a negative. But that choice, bringing this conversation full circle, is at the subconscious level because it's emotional.
It's based on the meaning that we give to that. Yeah, that's all it is. You're right. Okay. And that's the belief. That's at the unconscious level. So if I say I'm really nervous about, let's say I was really nervous about this podcast. I'm so nervous about this podcast. From a frequency perspective, that's the same as feeling excitement. Yeah. But just changing the words, that's where the NLP comes in, saying I'm really excited about this podcast versus I'm nervous, changes the meaning. Now, when we're talking about fear, that's a very active fear based on something where we need to protect ourselves from a physiological perspective for safety.
Like a fight or flight.
Correct.
Okay.
Then it is different than excitement.
Yes.
There's kind of different levels of it, but certainly language is very important. So when you and your viewers think about things in their life and how they feel, always change the language to be towards moving towards excitement, change, the vision that you have for yourself versus moving away from the pain, right? Like nervousness, or I'm worried, I'm afraid, I'm, all of those things.
What is the difference between moving towards excitement or pleasure and moving away from pain? Because in the work I've done with Alex up to this point, there is a very distinguishable difference in terms of how those two mechanisms motivate or inhibit.
Correct. So really, when we're looking to create a change in our life, typically for most people, it's a blend. So we're moving towards something. Let's say if I wanted to, if I had a certain job and I wanted to change a job, then I'm moving towards, having a more fulfilling job. I want to have maybe more money, whatever it might be. But I may be, moving away from not having enough challenge where I am, or maybe having a boss that's not treating me well, whatever. So both of those things are energies that can get momentum, right? Can get us to take action.
Sure.
Okay. But when we are, so let's say if we say that over here is what I want and over here is what I don't want. Okay. So if I am moving away from the fact that I'm not happy with my boss and, the location is not great and I'm not earning that much money or whatever. So I'm facing that way, right? But I'm moving away from that. What's going to happen is because there's certain emotional addictions that we have, I'm going to get far enough away from that where I just don't feel the pain anymore. Maybe I get a promotion or maybe I get some new project to do. So I've moved far enough away from the pain that my unconscious mind is going to say, okay, Vered, so you're not feeling that pain anymore. That's great. And it's going to create opportunities for me to experience that pain again. So this is why people get into these cycles, right? Where they kind of fall down and then they get back up and they fall down, or maybe it's in relationships, attracting the same kinds of people or getting even other jobs, but still having jobs that are not fulfilling or people that they don't enjoy working with or whatever.
Right.
So what we want to make sure is that we understand what all of those programs are, release all those negative emotions, release all those limiting beliefs, all those things that you need to let go of so that we can face over here.
Okay.
And move towards what we want.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, be mindful of daily practices so we don't create new programs because, every day we're going to be facing that. The question is, how quickly do we face back?
Right.
So if we are, let's say, moving towards starting our own business, great. But then at some point, maybe something will happen with a client or we get some kind of a setback as we do whenever we create change. So we're facing over there. Question is, how resilient are we? How quickly can we shift back to focusing on what we want?
Right. You've mentioned it a couple times up to this point. I really want to dive into this addiction thing.
Yeah.
Right. The five dominant negative emotions are anger, fear, guilt. These are out of order, but what's left? Hurt and sadness. How can anybody be addicted to that? Explain that to me.
Well, the addictions are hormonal. So chemicals are a blend typically of about 1,400 different chemicals in our body. So some people, let's say, are addicted to guilt. So what does that mean? So at some point, they felt there was some situation and they gave that situation a certain meaning. Yeah. Like I, should feel, and then they experienced the emotion of guilt. And then their brain, because the brain works on as much as possible automatic patterns so that it doesn't take that much energy, glucose to create new patterns. So it'll say, okay, then I'm going to create opportunities to feel more guilt. So it'll manifest opportunities for us to experience guilt, whether it's at work or at home or whatnot. So I remember one of my clients, after we let go of guilt, this is somebody who was looking to transition into a new job. And she texted me right after we did that the next day. And she said, oh my God, Vera, this thing worked. And I said, well, what happened? And she said, well, I felt guilt. I came to work this morning and I saw the people and I started to feel guilty about the fact that I want to leave. And it went away in like 30 seconds. I just let it go. And that's exactly what happens when you do this process. Anytime it's unwarranted or inappropriate to feel guilt, where we don't need to, it's not protecting us in some way, we can just let it go. Yeah.
Interesting. So your body will subconsciously create opportunities to regress. Is that
opportunities to experience that feeling?
Okay.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the stages of competence that you so eloquently, and I'm going to butcher this whole thing, but presented at the Vistage meeting, in that the four levels are unconscious incompetence.
That's right.
Right. Conscious incompetence. Let me try to explain this as best I can. So unconscious incompetence is you just don't know what you don't know. Correct? Okay.
Perfect.
Conscious incompetence, you're now aware of what you don't know. And then you have conscious competence, where you have to think about doing something as you're doing it. And then unconscious competence, where it's autopilot, right? Kind of like learning to drive. You don't know how. Now you have to think about the turn signal, or now you're behind the wheel and messing it all up. You're in driving school. Then you have to think about the turn signal. And now you leave work, you get home, and you don't remember anything in between. But what was most interesting about that, the way you presented it, is while these stages of learning are awesome, and they present uh, levels of progress, that last level, that unconscious competence place, can be also dangerous because complacency lives there.
Correct.
There's no justification at that place to improve. You don't have to. It's good enough, right? So part of facilitating success is intentionally leaving unconscious competence and putting yourself back in conscious competence, where you have to think and optimize and improve, which will eventually evolve again into unconscious competence.
Yes. So,
Or did I just completely blow
no,
that?
you did great. You did great. Now, unconscious competence could be where somebody's still improving.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be where you're you just keep getting better and better what you do because you're doing it all the time.
You're shortening the loop.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
So think of a CEO who is able to make decisions like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's because they've done it so many times, and unconsciously the mind knows what has worked and what doesn't work. So
Okay.
they're able to access that much more quickly. It's automatic, it's habitual, it's intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
When they need to change something, let's say there's a change that's going on in the organization, maybe the market demands that the company go in a certain direction or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to adapt our behavior, that's when we need to take a step back and become, or when we want to train others to become unconsciously competent, we need to take a step back and become conscious of what it is that we're doing.
Okay.
And that's when we kind of take that and say, okay, what are we doing? So, for example, I had a gentleman that I was helping that is looking to systematize his company. He wants to be working more, on the business versus in the business, like many entrepreneurs when they get to a certain level.
Sure.
And to be able to delegate more to his team. He was unconsciously competent about how he's getting clients, about how the company is doing all these things. He needed to take that step back and become consciously competent, so that he could say, okay, what am I doing that's working?
Okay.
What is that process? And then thereby help other people to get there. Or if he wants to shift his own patterns of behavior, he needs to first become aware of what he's doing so that he'll know what to change.
Right. Huh. Okay. So that makes so much more sense in terms of how it's done. The importance of, not to overuse the word consciousness, but the importance of becoming aware and conscious of these evolutionary patterns. Where does somebody go to level up that way?
At a very basic level, I would say it's first take a good hard look at your life, at the truth of your life, and say what's working and what isn't, meaning what's aligned with what I desire and what is not. And anytime you notice some misalignment, where you want something, but it's not quite there, then it's an opportunity to pause and say, okay, what do I want in this area of my life? What's important to me, So to do some values work. And then to say, okay, and what do I believe about this? Yeah.
Okay.
What do I believe about my ability to do this? What do I believe about my ability to do it quickly and easily? And then you notice some kind of thought patterns come up, and it's important not to kind of shove those aside and say logically, of course that makes no sense.
Sure.
Right? But rather to know that there's something there, to be curious about it, like a little kid, just curious about it.
Yeah.
Where might that come from? And then to focus on, okay, what do I want? So if this is the pattern of what I don't want, what do I want? And then to take actions to moving there. Okay. So for example, I had one of my clients, very successful person in the financial services industry. He wanted to grow his business, take his business to the next level. And he knew that in order to do that, he needs to work with higher net worth folks.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So, but yet, even though he was a very social person, very really had a very easy way to work with people, there was something holding him back about those very affluent folks. There was some kind of a block.
Sure.
And so he became aware, we did some work, and he became aware that he believed at some level that he's not good enough to work with them. Now, of course, that's not a conscious thing, because he could talk all day about all his credentials and all his successes. And so it wasn't a conscious thing, but he felt some pain around that. So he knew that there was something there. As soon as we did that work, he was able to now face that direction. Yeah. So he was able to make the appointment. It's actually a really interesting story, because his son at the time was going to school with the daughter of a gentleman in who owns a $1 billion company.
Okay.
And I remember when we did a follow-up session, he said, Farid, you'll never believe what happened. I have this meeting with this billionaire. And I said, that's fantastic. What happened? Well, he said, I became conscious of the fact that this little girl who's in my son's class, her, that by the way, that's her father. He's been trying to get an appointment with him for years. I'll make it short, but my sister and the guy's sister went to school together.
Oh, wow.
So she was able to somehow coordinate this meeting. Now, they'd been going to the same class for 10 years. So how is it that he wasn't conscious of that until that moment? Because of that block.
Okay.
That block, that belief limited his ability to consciously become aware of the ideas and the intuition to help him get to where he wants. So a lot of people will want to create a change and they'll be like, but I don't know how to do it. I just don't know how to do it. And that'll kind of block them and they'll stop because they'll be from that place of fear. But if we know that we just need to know the next right step, but to do the work to release all of the resistance to the change, then our unconscious mind will give us the answers. All of a sudden the phone call will happen. All of a sudden the opportunity will come knocking, if you will, or we'll get that impulse of thought, I should do this, I should sign up for that. And there you go. In our email, there's a course that pops up or a book that's fallen off the shelf. So that's just the way it is. But we first have to release the resistance. And that is why if you ever want something, but you're not there quite yet, look over here, become conscious, and then shift it.
Oh, man, that's so powerful. I feel like that's so in real time, like as you're explaining that and people are listening, they're like playing this tape of, now they've increased their consciousness of those circumstances that happened on accident, or
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And the releasing of resistance, I feel like, is so powerful. There's a book, I can't remember the author, I'm horrible at that, but it's called The War of Art. And in it he talks about whenever you're making dramatic or strategic change, the way he frames it is the universe will test you by putting resistance in your way almost immediately, right? Because it's such a significant shift. And based on this conversation, what that brings up, what that triggers for me is that it's not like the universe testing your resolve. It's that you're moving into that second stage where you're now becoming aware of how much is actually required to accomplish this change.
Yes. So those things come into our consciousness, into our perception, into our reality, if you will. In order to make us even more conscious, first of all, of what we want, because first of all, if we don't experience that, like let's say if I've never experienced hunger, right, then my desire for food is not going to be as great as if I've experienced that.
Right.
Yeah. Or so it's the same idea. You have to experience some pain to be able to say, okay, I want this.
Yes.
Yeah? So you have to experience the scarcity to want the abundance, if you will.
Okay.
And so once you become conscious of what you want, then it's about saying, okay, what do I need to let go of in order for me to increase my consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I believe that we are here for, right? All the struggles, if you will, that
Mm-hmm.
come along the way
Right.
are there to teach us something,
Right.
to teach us something so that we can love ourselves more, that we can be more in our heart,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, create what it is that we want to create.
Now, you obviously work with a lot of people that are striving to accomplish great things, and in a lot of cases, they're looking to accomplish or create impact that is immensely greater than themselves, you know. And in that endeavor, it's really easy to fall into that frame of imposter syndrome, right? That feeling of lacking, not being good enough, not being prepared enough, not being educated enough, so on and so forth. What is the emotion tied to that imposter syndrome?
The emotion could be multiple emotions,
Okay.
actually.
Mhm.
So the thought is, I mean, the universal thing is, I'm not enough. Yeah.
Okay.
But the emotion with that could be, I mean, it's all a derivative of fear. It's all low frequency energies.
Okay.
But it could sound like, like a worry. It could be, that what if I fail? What's going to
Mhm.
happen? Or it could be one of fear of success. Yeah,
Sure.
it could be one of, okay, what if I do this? What's going to happen to my exercise routine,
Yeah.
to my time with my family? So there's so many things,
Yeah.
so many different emotions that could be tied to it.
Okay. Now, why would somebody be afraid of success? Right? So like
Yeah.
that brings up a very good point, because people start down this journey, to rid themselves of all these obvious negative things. I want to succeed, so I need to avoid failure, blah 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 blah. But there's also that piece, and where you acknowledge, like, oh wow, like I've been not succeeding because I'm actually fearful of success.
Correct. If on some level, even if it's at the unconscious level, if at some level you believe that success is going to harm you or harm your well-being or your family or your community or whatever in some way, then you're in protection mode. And anytime
Okay.
you're in protection mode, you're facing over there.
Okay.
You're not truly stepping into what you want. So you're self-sabotaging in a way. So you're going to be blocking certain thoughts that are going to lead you to feel something and take some action and get some result. So it is absolutely important to become conscious of what are those things that are driving the I'm not enough, right? Because a lot of people, when they step into a bigger platform,
Yes.
or they want to have a bigger impact, as you said, a more profound impact on more people, then they, for example, the client that I worked with a couple of days ago, she was worried about the fact that it would impact her schedule, and it would take too much of her, so she would so one of the things that we worked on is having that, all of that, with more ease, right? To have with more ease. And so it's actually very common with the people that I work with, to on some level worry about, okay, I believe that this can happen for me. I know
Sure.
this is possible,
Right.
but do I really want it? And if so, what that would look like. So it's fine tuning the vision. So we're not just getting what we want. And when clients write goals, we don't just write them, I'm going to do this and da 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 da. Or
Yeah.
we always make sure to always write it in the future tense, but we include how we're going to feel, the positive feeling. So the unconscious mind knows there's no danger. We're safe over here. It's going to
Okay.
feel really good, because
Yeah.
what's driving the unconscious mind is the emotion. It wants to feel something. Right?
Yeah.
So when we are very clear about how we're going to feel, that we're totally safe, totally protected to do what
Right.
we want.
Okay.
Our life is not going to be in danger in some way, meaning, we're not going to have time for ourselves or for others or to do what we love. Then we can go, take those actions with more ease. We
Yeah.
just won't have thoughts that limit us.
Right. Right. Did you feel, as you were stepping into this space, any of that? Did you have to work through any of that, or had you done that work for other things that allowed you to step right into this space?
That was one of the big things that when I talked about the NLP practitioner that allowed me to let go of the fear. It was actually a technique that we did is called parts integration. And it's a technique that I use often with clients to integrate different parts of their unconscious mind.
Okay.
Where part of you may want something, but a part of you doesn't. You know, it's that thing. And, and, you know, having that kind of integrated into the whole, kind of remerging, if you will, into the greater whole.
Yeah.
And that process is so powerful. Because what happened for me is that I believe that if I take my business to the next level, that I won't have time to be a good enough mother or a good enough wife. I have 3 daughters, and they were even younger back then. They needed me more even than they do today. And that was a big obstacle. I kept myself small for many years. And when I let that go and I did the timeline therapy to release the fear, I knew that it'll always be okay. That, you know, I'll have just the right amount of time to do what I need. And it actually has worked out that way. So, I mean, there are always things that come up that I personally do work on. I do timeline therapy on myself all the time. I do all kinds of techniques on myself all the time, because it's evolving. Anytime we go to the next level, the body is wired to resist that in some way. So I need to become what that resistance is, and then move to that next level of learning, and take the next step.
So this is a process of continuation. Like you don't ever. No, I think this is a very important point. You know, that's a very obvious statement as we are having this conversation. But I think to drive the point home, as you continue to evolve, that work is still required, because, you know, if it's not apparent yet, one of the common themes of this conversation is that along the journey, there are things that served you back then that no longer serve you now. And as you move from one level to the next, that thing that no longer serves you also evolves.
The thing that no longer serves us transforms.
There you go.
There's a transmutation, if you will, that happens into something that serves us moving forward.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like that's so profound, and it needs to be driven home, that the work never stops. You know, I've got 2 ACL reconstructions on this knee, a really bad couple of discs in my back, and from a physiological standpoint, working through physical therapy and stuff like that, the best guidance I've ever gotten in that process is to never stop rehabbing. Right? Always do those little things, that extra. And, you know, that also plays into the work that we're talking about in this conversation is you always have to come back to that, right? That you're always reconditioning all the time. Yeah. Right?
I think we're wired for growth. We're wired for evolution. And so I think even when, you know, someone reaches a certain level, then they're like, okay, what's next? And a lot of the people that I've worked with have reached those levels, and they're, you know, selling their businesses, and they've come to me for help of, okay, what do I do next that's meaningful and it's going to add significance? So and when that happens, still, of course, there are programs that come up that we need to work on.
Right.
So, you know, I think that the rehabilitation, if you will, that you spoke about is one where it's about physical action, like in your case, the physical therapy, and it's also the mental, emotional work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The emotional component. How are the subconscious and emotion connected?
So the unconscious mind is the domain of emotion. And what I mean by that is that our conscious mind is, you know, it is what we would think of as, of course, anything that we're conscious of, but it is where our thoughts and our goals and our intentions, it's what I call the goal setter. It's, you know, this is what I want and this is why I want it. Great. Now, if that was enough, of course, everybody would have what they wanted.
Right.
So the unconscious mind is the domain of emotions in the sense that the heart, the physical heart, is the absolute powerhouse in the body. So we think that we make decisions and we do behaviors from here, but it actually starts from our heart.
Okay.
At an emotional level, it actually starts from the heart. So 80 to 90% of the information travels from our heart up to our brain, up the autonomic nervous system.
Sure.
Okay, something called the vagus nerve, to the thalamus, and that controls our thinking and what we think we're making decisions from.
Okay.
So our heart has access to intuitive intelligence, to intelligence that comes from information that's in this electromagnetic field around our body. Now, everything that I'm sharing is science. We can measure it 3 to 10 feet around our bodies. And anybody who's interested to learn more can go on heartmath.org. It's the Heart Math Institute, a nonprofit that measures that state of optimal performance, the state of coherence, where our conscious mind, our head brain, and our unconscious mind, right, our
Heart
physical
brain.
heart, which is actually a brain. There are neural networks around the heart.
Sure.
Where when we get into that state where we tune into our emotions and we do the work to feel good, to feel a positive emotion more of the time, genuinely feel it, not just think it, like not just think I'm grateful for whatever, but actually feel it in our heart. What happens is that we get more coherent. We get into this place where literally we have a different heart rate variability pattern. And that makes us more coherent. And that is why we're able to access the ideas, all the intuition that get us over here. What is the next step, right? And so that's the magic, if you will, but it's not magic. It's just science. So you asked about, the heart, the unconscious mind being the domain of emotions. That's all it is. It's all emotions, because thoughts, they're, electrical vibrations, and emotions are magnetic, right? And that together they form this field around our body. So when I have a certain belief, let's say I'm facing over there and I'm thinking I'm not good enough, there is an actual frequency associated with that thought and a chemical component associated, because when I have that thought, my limbic system, my emotional brain, my chemical brain sends that chemical cocktail into my body that equals that emotion. So if I'm feeling fear, obviously, I'm going to have cortisol and other things in my body. If I'm feeling, if I'm over here and I'm visioning what I want and I'm feeling so good, I'm going to have DHEA, or vitality hormone, or other good feeling hormones like dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, all of those. And that makes me feel really good. And when I'm feeling really good, then I get those awesome ideas and I get to where I want to go.
Okay. And what are some of the systems or mechanisms that you have in place, or some of the practices that you have with your clients that get them to shift from looking this way to consciously getting away from that and focusing on where they actually want to go?
So, I mean, at the most simplistic level, I would say is to, first of all, become conscious of what you want. Because it always starts with desire. Because we have all kinds of patterns, but we don't need to change everything, right? Some of them are not really harming us in some way, even if they're limiting patterns, but if they're not really limiting us, because we don't want, like, let's say if I believed I'm not a good singer, but if I didn't want to be a singer, then why would I even need to change that? So I would focus on things that are actually inhibiting me from where I want to go. So I become conscious of what I want. And then what I would say is I would start to, and I would actually write a goal for that. And then I would tune in and say, okay, as I think about this goal, this thing that I want to change in my life, what am I thinking, feeling about it? Right? Kind of like asking, what do I believe about it? And I would just take a blank piece of paper and start writing that down. Right? Like, I think it's going to be hard. I think it's going to take a long time. I did it twice and it didn't work. And, my buddy Joe did it and it didn't work for him, or whatever, right? All that noise. And then we look at that page and we say, okay, out of all of those things, what's the one thing? I would start with one thing that's kind of causing me the most pain, that's really resonating with me, even if it makes zero not logical sense whatsoever. But on an emotional level, where do I feel something around? And I would focus on that and say, okay, that is just a belief pattern, which means it's just a thought that I've repeated over and over and over again enough times until I believe it to be true. But most cases it isn't. So I would say, okay, well, what's the pain that this belief has caused me in my life, right? And I'd become conscious of that. That adds momentum, because remember, the unconscious mind moves from pain. So we want to kind of bring that pain, but also what's the reward that I'm going to get when I let this belief go, right? When I believe I am good enough. Right? So let's say I wanted to be a singer and I believe, okay, I am, then, I have the capacity, the ability to learn what I need to learn to become a better singer. And then I would ask myself, well, how true is this belief? Right? Like, let's say the singing belief, right? So How true is it that I'm not a good singer? Well, maybe not so true because, I've gotten this feedback and maybe I've done this and maybe I have the potential to improve and right? So I would start to look at evidence that validates the fact that that old thought that I used to think is not really true or not true anymore or not true all of the time. We just want to open the door a little bit. The moment you open the door of belief, all of a sudden you'll get more and more and more of that evidence. But if I've told myself I can't do something, my brain is would love to help me. My unconscious mind would love to help me, but it can't because I've given it an order to not do that, right? To not allow me to do it, to protect me. So I would say, well, how true is this belief? And try to give myself evidence to prove that it's not true. Okay. And then, of course, I would shift it to a new belief, which could sound like an affirmation, like an I am statement. And when I repeat that, I want to repeat it with emotion. Because remember, we said just affirmations at the head level, I'm strong, I'm strong, I'm strong, won't really do much. But if I feel strong, if I get into the body pose of strong, and if I say it with a certain tone of voice, my body believes me. Yeah, the unconscious mind is my body's, my emotions will believe me. And if I do it with enough repetition, I will start to actually believe that. And it'll go from a conscious level down to an unconscious, like what we talked about, the unconscious competence, where I just know that I can.
Yeah.
It's that old me is not me anymore. I don't know who that was anymore.
Right.
So when I do timeline therapy work on limiting decisions or other work, and literally I will read back to clients things that they've said, and they'll laugh out loud. They'll be like, "Oh my God!" And you probably experienced that too. That is not me anymore. It's just like a foreign individual because you are a different person. Neurologically, you are a different person. Emotionally, chemically, you're a different person.
Right.
It's a different state of being. And that's the place to create from. You want to create over here, not from there. Because when we're creating from there, we're just recreating more of the same.
Oh, very. That's it. That's it. I think that puts an amazing bow on this conversation. Where can my 20 percenters find you, follow you, support you?
They can find me, one way is through my website, which is veredkogan.com, veredkogan.com. They can find me on Facebook, Vered Kogan, on LinkedIn, Vered Kogan. And I would love for them to engage and learn more. They can sign up on my website for my newsletter, get all kinds of videos and articles to help them face what they want even more often so that they can create it the way they want to create it.
Yeah. I really appreciate you making the time. Yeah. And thanks for reading Inner Circle.
Oh, my goodness. I loved it. Yeah. I loved it. Thank you for sharing it with me. I loved hearing your story. I loved hearing the truth of all those growth experiences because we've all been there and we've all done things that in retrospect, we wouldn't do again. And yet they happened to us for a purpose. And we're always doing the best that we can. And I hope your listeners will really take that. We're always doing the best that we can, no matter where we are in those 4 levels of learning or even facing what we don't want. We are where we are and we're doing the best that we can. The question is, what do we choose to do once we become aware of that? Yeah. And I love that you shared your story. I think it's very inspirational and I'm sure has helped many, many people.
I appreciate that. Thanks. That means a lot. For everybody out there, the 20 Percenters Tribe, remember, continue to focus on the things that matter: health, wealth, relationships, and time. Check us out at 20percentercircle.com, and we'll see you soon.